It's time for us all to join together to create the world of our dreams. Welcome to Wellness World Radio, a co-creative radio show that allows humanity to focus its mind and intention on creating a better world. This show features wellness news, ideas, innovations, and music provided by our listeners and patrons worldwide. Good day, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Wellness World Radio. This is your host, Suzette Schmidal, and today we will explore the question, are we truly co-creating our world? To find out more, I decided to turn to science. What are the latest scientific findings on co-creation? And just how much do our mind, thoughts, and emotions affect our experience of reality? Our first interview is with neuroscience researcher Danielle Mauro, who is the publisher of High Performance Brain magazine and author of Build Yourself a Better Brain. Danielle is also the founder of Speaking Visionaries, Inc., through which he has organized thought leader speaker events with speakers such as Greg Braden, who loves to bridge the gap between science and consciousness. Danielle also organizes peace concerts and group meditations in Canada's National Capital Region. Hi, Daniel. Thank you for meeting with me today to discuss co-creation on Wellness World Radio.
Hi, Suzette. Thanks for having me today.
The first question I would like to ask you is on the new science regarding the relationship between consciousness and the physical universe. Can you give us an overview about the latest scientific discoveries relating mind, consciousness, physics, and matter?
Yeah, so in order to answer that question, I'd like to offer you a quote from Max Planck, who is considered the father of quantum mechanics. And he said this, quote, "All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind the force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." So here is a scientist, Max Planck, who's suggesting that there's some kind of conscious, intelligent being behind what we know as matter, what we know as the physics of matter. So I thought that's a great starting point to talk about the relationship between matter and consciousness, between the mind and the body, essentially getting into the physics of consciousness. We know that there's this mind-body connection, and we know that we have creative capabilities. And so what I want to suggest is that there's different levels of co-creation available to us. One is that we can influence the state of our body with our thoughts because of the mind-body connection. We can influence the biology in the cells and the heart and the brain. The other level is by our actions and by our intentions, we can influence our outer environment and the circumstances of our life. So that's the second level of co-creation. The third level is connecting in with the global field on the planet, connecting in through something called the coherence principle. And so essentially we're all connected at an underlying level called the field that surrounds the planet and that connects all biological beings, including human beings.
Is there any evidence from the fields of biology or genetics that suggests we can influence our genes or impact the cells in our body?
Thank you for that question, Suzette. I'd like to talk to you about Bruce Lipton's work because he's really one of the preeminent geniuses on how our biology really works. And he really kind of pioneered this field called epigenetics, which is really this idea that our external environment is influencing our genes and that in fact we can impact our genetics. We can actually rewrite or overwrite the genetics that we've been given. And it all has to do with the environments of our perceptions and our mind. So what he did some interesting research that went against the dogma of traditional biology. In fact, the very things he was teaching he came up with research that went against what was typically being taught in biology classes and medical school regarding how genetics work. And essentially what he did is he did an experiment with stem cells, put them in a culture dish. They divided every 10 hours. And after several weeks, there were thousands. Okay. And then what he did next is to manipulate the culture medium. And that's essentially the cell's environment. And so by manipulating the culture medium, the stuff that the cell is sitting in, he was able to create 3 different cell types. One became bone, one became muscle, one became fat. Very same stem cell that's been divided thousands of times, and yet they become totally different substances because of the medium of which they're surrounding. In other words, their environment. So this relates to us as human beings. Because if our cells are in a healthy environment, they're healthy. If they're in an unhealthy environment, they can get sick. So basically what happens is he calls the human body basically the equivalent of a skin-covered petri dish, okay? So if you can think of the experiment that I just mentioned, essentially our culture medium is our blood. The medium that's surrounding our cells is the blood. And it has a certain composition and chemistry. And what influences that chemistry of our blood is brain chemistry. And what influences brain chemistry is our mind, is our perceptions of life. So here's the sequence. We have perceptions of what's going on around us. We interpret reality. That creates brain chemicals, which then adjust the composition of our blood. And the blood, again, is the culture medium of our cells. So that impacts the cells. So what that says is our perceptions, what we think about reality, is affecting our cells all the time. And essentially what we can do based on this finding is we can impact our genetics. We can rewrite our genes. In fact, what they found is there's something like 30,000 different variations of a single gene that are available based on the environment of the cellular structure. And that all has to do with our thoughts and how we think. So that is the power of our thoughts. That is the whole idea of the biology of belief, that our beliefs, our patterns of thought affect our cells and affect our genetics. That is epigenetics. Very empowering for people.
How fascinating. What fascinating information and research that's really confirming that our thoughts have something to do with our health and the well-being of our bodies. I'd like to discuss the role of emotions a bit. It seems like what I think about often conjures some emotions inside of me. For example, if I start thinking of the saddest time in my life, I can actually re-experience some of these emotions. What is science actually saying about the role of emotions to influence, say, our physical health, energies, thought patterns?
So this is a great topic that I'm really excited about because emotions are so important. And here we're getting into the whole theme of heart intelligence. And there's a whole bunch of science that's come out the last few decades about the power and intelligence and sensitivity of the heart. And there's different directions we can go in here, but I'd like to first of all talk about the concept of heart coherence, because I think that's pretty important. Heart coherence is reflected in something called our heart rate variability, which is just a measure of the beat-to-beat changes, the changes in the heartbeat from one second to another. And a healthy heart actually changes its heart variability. In other words, we have our average heart rate over a minute, but if you look at that, there's a cycling of going fast and then slow. And if we're in a state of coherence, that's reflected in the smooth sine wave-like shape of heart rate variability. The heart's speeding up and slowing down, and it does that in cycles. And if it's in a state of coherence, we should have about 6 of those a minute, so every 10 seconds roughly. Okay, so you know you're coherent when you're feeling sort of an inner peace, an inner harmony. If a person's feeling sort of intense emotions, what we call negative emotions like fear or anger, frustration, what that does is it gets totally out of coherence, and that's reflected in a complete lack of coherence at the heart level in terms of that heart rate variability. It looks very jagged and chaotic. And so how do we create this coherence? Well, the quick techniques that have been developed and scientifically validated are just using your breath, focusing on the heart, and using breathing into your heart and feeling heart-centered emotions, what they call, heart, love, care, compassion, gratitude. So when you're breathing slowly and you're feeling those emotions, there's a fairly fast response. You can actually create a state of coherence fairly quickly. And so there's this connection between our emotions and our physiology, our heart, what's called the intelligence of the heart. The heart is such an intelligent structure. It's actually the most powerful biological resonator in the body. It actually influences the brain. It actually is sending more information to the brain than the brain is sending to the heart. Because we tend to think of the brain as sort of the executive master and the system in our body that rules all. But actually the heart has a leg up, so to speak, because of this intuitive-based intelligence, this heart-centered, this emotional intelligence. So when the heart is in resonance and when there's a coherence in the heart, it's reflected in all the bodily systems harmonizing. The neuroendocrine system, the immune system is boosted, and also the brain goes into coherence, so you can think more clearly. So all that to say is the heart has an endless ability to monitor, and not only that, to influence all the other systems in the body. And it creates a field that is much larger than the brain. The field extends several feet from the body. And so you can feel other people because our fields extend and they overlap. So there's this sensing of other people. And that's also where intuition comes from. It's this deep heart intelligence.
After the break, we will return to neuroscience researcher Danielle Mauro, who will be sharing information on a global organization that studies the relationship between heart bioenergy and the magnetics of the earth. But first, let's focus our mind on solutions for a better world with some environmental news about what is new out there that can green our planet. Since most people drive alone to go to work, imagine driving in the safety and convenience of a car that has the efficiency of a motorcycle. The C1 is considered the vehicle of the future. With its sleek European design and appearance, it's like a motorcycle that is fully enclosed and self-balancing, and protects the driver and passengers from the elements with car-like safety and an intuitive car-like interface. The rear area is large enough to accommodate a passenger, or about as much cargo as you can carry on a plane. The C1 is considered a motorcycle, allowing the driver to split lanes and easily slip through traffic, cutting up to 50% off of commute times. Once at their destination, the driver can park in the tiniest spaces, even motorcycle-specific parking. The C1 is 100% electric, with a top speed of 100 miles per hour and a range of up to 200 miles per charge. It uses high torque in-hub motors to accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6 seconds. Charge times depend on voltage, from 6 hours on 110-120 volt to less than a half hour at a 400-500 volt quick charge station. The secret sauce of the C1 is the patented gyroscopic stability system. Using a pair of flywheels spinning at 10,000 RPM, the gyro system exerts 1,300 pounds of torque to control the tilt and lean of the vehicle. This allows the C1 to lean itself into and out of turns, and is powerful enough to keep the C1 upright even in a collision. Talk about a great safety feature in such a small vehicle. Imagine if everyone was driving something like this, how this could reduce greenhouse gas emissions and conserve energy. To find out more about this new innovation, visit www.litmotors.com. Now let's imagine living in a world where homelessness no longer exists. This dream is becoming a reality in different cities around the world. According to aplus.com, a Canadian city completely eradicates homelessness with a brand new approach. In the Canadian town of Medicine Hat, Alberta, where 60,000 people live, everyone has a home tonight. That's after 6 years of instituting a housing first policy that flips the status quo on its head, but has helped restore safety and shelter to a city that needed it. Back in 2009, Mayor Ted Clugston was actively opposing the policy, which pledges to give any person who spends 10 days on the street a home. Today, he has come to realize that not only does the policy work for the people, but it works for the government too. This is the cheapest and the most humane way to treat people, he told the CBC. Louise Bradley, President and CEO of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, helped conduct a study that looked at 2,000 people over 5 different cities, and the results were invaluable. What they found was that when homeless people were told to get clean or find other ways to get their lives together before applying for housing, they inevitably fell back into cycles of drug use and poverty. That landed them back in emergency rooms, hospitals, detention centers, and shelters, all things that costs tax money. Speaking to CBC, Clugston estimated that it costs $20,000 to house a homeless person for the year, and close to $100,000 to keep them on the street. Clugston told the CBC, if you're addicted to drugs, it's going to be pretty hard to get off of them if you're sleeping under a park bench. And the great news is that it's working. City officials are saying that it typically doesn't take even 10 days to find people housing, and emergency room visits and interactions with police are dropping in Medicine Hat. Not only is this working well in Medicine Hat, Canada, but this is also working well in Utah, where a similar policy was introduced and homelessness was reduced by a huge 91%. Let's envision more and more cities coming on board with the idea of housing for all. Talk to your city officials about starting this kind of project. You can send them a link to the YouTube video entitled Medicine Hat Housing First Program for the Homeless. For those just tuning in, today's Wellness World radio show is on the science behind co-creating our world with neuroscience researcher Danielle Mauro, who is the publisher of High Performance Brain magazine and author of Build Yourself a Better Brain, who will be sharing information on a global organization that studies the relationship between heart bioenergy and the magnetics of the earth. Here is what he has to say on the topic. You mentioned heart coherence as a central component of the heart's unique intelligence. I understand that there is a global organization to study the relation between heart energies and magnetics of the earth. Can you tell us more about that initiative?
Sure, this is known as the Global Coherence Initiative, and it's tied in with research that's been conducted at the Institute of Heart Math. I'm just going to quote from one of the GCI mission, the Global Coherence Initiative mission, and they say, the Global Coherence Initiative is an international effort that seeks to help activate the heart of humanity and promote peace, harmony, and a shift in global consciousness. So that's kind of the underlying purpose, but it gets pretty sciencey. So I'm going to do my best to tie a couple of these pieces together, because essentially what's going on here is everything affects everything. We kind of know this, but what they want to do is measure how everything interacts. In other words, how does the solar activity affect the geomagnetic activity on the Earth? And how does that in turn affect human beings? Specifically, how does it affect our brain and autonomic nervous system? Because there is definitely a connection. There's this biological field that exists that interconnects us all. And what they're trying to do at GCI is understand this kind of two-way street. It's not just that the sun and the earth affects human brains, but that if we create a coherence, what I just talked about is this heart coherence, and we do this in sort of greater numbers, we can actually in turn affect the field itself to create that intention of peace and harmony on the world stage.
Wow, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So we are that powerful that we can actually affect in a grander scale the world around us, our environment.
Apparently we are, and it's not just something that comes from wisdom traditions from thousands of years ago. It's something that's being validated now by science. thanks to, the Institute of Heart Math and also the people that are involved with the Global Coherence Initiative. So they have something called the Global Coherence Monitoring System, and this is essentially the technology used to monitor the Earth's magnetic field. So it's considered state-of-the-art sensing technology. So they've got a bunch of these global coherence monitoring system around the planet. They're actually called magnometers. They have a network of magnometers or magnometers, and they want to have ultimately they want to have about a dozen of these sensor sites. So what they can do is pick up the magnetic information and relate it to what's going on in the world.
Do they have these at different sites around the world?
Yeah, so far, for instance, they've got one in Boulder Creek, California. They've got one in Saudi Arabia. They've got one actually in Alberta, Canada, as well as the northern region of New Zealand, and there's one in South Africa. So there's about half a dozen, perhaps more, but they're looking to have a dozen of these. So what are they monitoring? Well, they're continuously monitoring resonant frequencies in the Earth's magnetic field. They want to track the changes in geomagnetic activity that can be caused by solar storms, that can be caused by changes in the solar winds, the speed of the solar winds, and disruption in something called the Schumann resonance. There's this resonant frequencies in the cavity between the Earth and the ionosphere. So it's called the Schumann resonance, which overlaps with brain activity, by the way. So essentially, like these solar storms and so forth can impact the Schumann resonances, the geomagnetic activity, which in turn affects the cardiovascular, the human brain, and the autonomic nervous system. And the thing is, if there's a change in the Earth's magnetic field, it can cause, for instance, sleep disturbances, mental confusion, lack of energy, just a sense of feeling overwhelmed, right? Sometimes we feel that, we don't know why. Well, it could be that the activity on the planet is changing. It's different that day. Okay, but here's where it's really interesting is we want to see not only how the Earth's fields affect human biology and physiology, emotional, mental processes, and health. We'd also like to see, well, is it possible that the human energetic state, the state of the human heart through heart coherence, can actually impact the global field, right? If there's enough human hearts resonating coherence, could that impact the geomagnetic activity of the planet? And that's the idea. That's what they're trying to measure.
And will they be able to find anything with this research?
There is indications that, yes, indeed, there's a two-way direction. And I'll just highlight a few of their hypotheses, because that sums up in a nutshell where they're going. They're still in the process of research, so they don't have all the answers. But here's sort of their working hypothesis. When I say they, I'm talking about the Global Coherence Initiative people. So the first hypothesis, as I've mentioned, is that human and animal health, cognition, emotions, and our behavior, all that can be affected by anything from solar activity, the geomagnetic activity on the planet, and other Earth-related magnetic fields. So that's one. The second hypothesis they have is that the magnetic field, the Earth's magnetic field, is a carrier of biologically relevant information. This is just what they're saying. I'm kind of repeating what they're saying. And this biological information field, that's what connects all living systems. So that's their working hypothesis. And here's the third hypothesis that connects the human being to the field. And that is that every person is affecting potentially this global information field. So if we're all biologically connected, the interesting thing is that we potentially can affect this field. The fourth hypothesis is that collectively human consciousness can affect this global information field. And here's where it gets interesting. If this is true, and they find this to be true by continuing to measure these state-of-the-art sensing devices around the planet, that means that a bunch of large numbers of people creating heart-centered consciousness, states of love, care, and compassion will create like this coherent field environment, this wave that then benefits the rest of the population and the planet as a whole. And that's essentially would be the point of all this, to see that there's a two-way street here and to understand the science of what's going on, that yes, the sun affects the planet affects us, affects our fields, our brain, but that we can create deliberately, with intention, a state of heart coherence. And when we do that in larger numbers, we can influence these biological information fields. And that therefore we can sort of create this sense of peace. If we understand that we have this kind of power, we can get together in large numbers on a regular basis and actually impact the resonances and the frequencies on the planets in the geomagnetic field. So essentially, to sum it all up, there's this feedback loop between human beings and the Earth's energetic and magnetic systems. And the CGI, the Global Coherence Initiative, wants to map that out in more detail using their state-of-the-art sensing technology, which at this moment is in a number of locations in the world.
Are there other projects that validate this coherence initiative?
Yeah, in fact, there's a bunch of other projects going on around the world, and one in particular, whose the name of which I can't remember, but I'll just tell you about the results. They've got something called EGGS, which is electrogyrograph. And essentially what they're doing is they have these random number generators or random event generators to measure the impact of what's going on when there's a big global event. Like, for instance, when Princess Diana died and at her funeral, you notice changes in these random event generators. In other words, they're normally random and they suddenly go way off random. And the idea is that everybody, the consciousness of the planet, is involved in a synchronized emotional field. And what that does is it throws off the random event generators to make them completely non-random. Statistically, 1 in a billion, 1 in a trillion, that kind of thing. And so the other event, which was a big global event, which was 9/11, and the interesting thing with these random event generators is that they started detecting going way off random even several hours before the event, sort of foretelling the event that was going to happen in terms of the human information field. So the sort of intuitive heart field of humanity, so to speak, was picking up some big event was about to happen, as indicated by these random event generators going way off random several hours before the towers were about to be hit and fall. So that kind of validates what they're doing at the Global Coherence Initiative and their research. It's just a different project, it's a different group, but it's the same kind of thing using random event generators as their technology.
And so this shows, in a certain sense, how our environment, our outside environment, and ourselves. There's a real connection between the two.
Absolutely. There's this all shows that we're all interconnected. That the fields, the biological systems, the plant systems, the mineral systems, and humanity, we're all connected. And this is being shown with all these different research projects, which is nice because it's validating what's going on at a deeper level.
After the break, we will return to neuroscience researcher Danielle Mauro, who will be sharing information on studies that show how seasoned meditators are transforming the world. But first, here's a song that was shared with Wellness World Radio by the Pagan Dames, entitled Well May the World, written by Pete Seeger. The Pagan Dames are a newly formed roots trio consisting of Gatineau Hills musicians Elise Marlane, Chris McLean, and Tina Thierry. Enjoy.
Well, may the world go, the world go, the world go. Well, may the world go when I'm far away. Well, may the world go, the world go, the world go. Well, may the world go when I'm far away. forever may you drink therefrom. Oh, well, may the world go, the world go, the world go. Well, may the world go when I'm far away. Well, may the world go, the world go, the world go. Well, may the world go when I'm far away. Well, may the world go, the world go, the world go. Well, may the world go when I'm far away.
If you would like to send us an uplifting song that inspires wellness in the world, send it to Suzette@wellnesslearning.ca. Your rendition must be clean and green lyrics and quality sound that inspires a better world. Coming back to today's show on the science behind co-creation with neuroscience researcher Mauro. He will be sharing with us some interesting information on studies that show how seasoned meditators are transforming the world. I've been hearing about these large-scale studies in which relatively small numbers of people who meditate together can actually influence the larger population. Can you touch on one or two of those studies for us?
Sure, that's a really exciting topic, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about with the Global Coherence Initiative. Only here what they're doing is research as well, but they're doing research with groups of meditators, okay? And so this has been known as the global Maharishi effect. And the people that do transcendental meditation, and they have these highly trained meditators, these TM practitioners, that get to a high level of coherence, and they've measured it in the brains of these TM meditators. And it creates, they're able to sort of create this field effect. So in a nutshell, what they found with these meditation studies, and there's about 50 or so solid studies, is that if you get sort of a minimum quota of people in a certain population meditating, you start to influence the collective in terms of measurable statistics. Like, for instance, if you get this minimum critical mass of people meditating, they're really good at it, and you compare it to like a control city, for instance, what you find is there's a bunch of stats that go down, like the crime rates go down, activities of violence, hospital emergencies, and so forth. Even economic indicators are changed. So if you'd like, I can mention a couple of the specific studies they've done so we can kind of understand that a bit more.
That's wonderful to think that, you know, we have the power to influence the world. We have the power to influence our surroundings. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's been proven again and again. This research has been going on for several decades now. So I'd like to reference a study they did in England. And this was interesting. They had large groups of people meditating in a city, and then there was a control city where people were not meditating at all. And so they did a study and published a study, and here's what they found. This was in Merseyside in Great Britain, by the way. What they found was that there was 250,000 less crimes in Merseyside from 1988 to 1992 than would have been expected had that city continued to follow the national crime trend. In other words, if they were to sort of extrapolate from the crime trend before that period, there should have been 250,000 more crimes.
Wow.
Okay, and
that's huge.
Right, and the cool thing is, of course, they're taking into account all sorts of background variables that may influence. So they factor out and take into account demographic change, economic variables, police practice, and other things that could account for that change, because you could have that change for other reasons. So you really want to make sure that, well, was it really the meditation? They found that, yes, they've factored all those other variables out, and even with all that taken care of, the crime rate should have been much higher. So the only thing that they contribute to is they had a significant number of people meditating in Merseyside relative to control city, and sure enough, the crime rate dropped by 13%. And this was a 4-year period from 1988 to 1992.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So I can tell you about another study.
That's encouraging for someone like me who teaches, mindfulness meditation to, actually share this with students so that they can realize what type of impact meditation and mindfulness can have.
Absolutely. We know that, of course, it's good for our health. That's the latest science is saying it's As I mentioned with Bruce Lipton, we can affect our genetics, we can affect our immune system. There's lots of health benefits and physiological benefits at the individual level. But here what we're saying is, hey, if you do meditation in a group, with a group of people, depending on the size of the group, you can actually affect the collective, the crime rates, the hospital, and all that stuff. So another study I'd like to tell you about, which was really compelling, this is with the Peace Project, and there was this, a lot of terrorism and so forth going on in the Middle East. And, so they were measuring, they had meditators, these TM meditators, doing this very advanced technique, okay? And they had them positioned in Jerusalem, but they were close to Lebanon, okay? So they were actually in Jerusalem. So they measured a couple things. They measured the changes in war activities that were going on in Lebanon, okay? But they also measured what they call quality of life indicators in Jerusalem. In other words, they were looking at the stock market index, automobile accidents, number of fires, even the temperature, measuring all this stuff in Jerusalem to see if, are these meditators affecting these quality of life indicators, and or might they affect war activities? And sure enough, here's what they found. This was August of 1983 that they began to conduct this and do this officially and start measuring. They found that when there was a critical mass of meditators positioned, that the war deaths were reduced in Lebanon. They were reduced by 76%.
76%?
76%. But this was only on days when there was a high enough participation in the meditating group. In other words, there's this kind of, you need this minimum quota. They call it the super radiance effect. What the super radiance effect is, what they found, if you have the square root of 1%, that's the minimum number of people you need to start to generate this effect. In other words, when they had that number or beyond, that's when the war deaths decreased. But as soon as they did not have enough meditators, it was below square root of percent, it went back up to its normal thing. So you could see with the graph, depending on how many meditators there was, if they were beyond that critical mass, you saw the impact in the crime, the quality of life, and specifically the reduced terrorist activity in Lebanon. So it's completely mathematical. This square root of a percent is a very small number. To give you an idea, if you have a population of 10,000 people, you only need 10 people. 10 people would be the square root of 1% of 10,000. So you only need 10 people doing, a really seasoned meditation technique like TM, Transcendental Meditation. You only need 10 people to affect a population of 10,000.
That is amazing. That I'm going to use this research in my classes. Thank you
It's
much.
great research. And just to put this in the world perspective, what would be the number to get to impact the whole population? So we have about roughly 7 billion people on the planet right now. What would be that square root of 1%? Turns out to be not a very big number at all. It's roughly 9,300. 9,300. So if you got 9,300 seasoned meditators getting to a state of heart coherence and brain coherence, you could actually impact the field of the whole planet. So you'd have to have those people meditating continuously. And that's the minimum. You don't want the minimum, but that's the minimum where mathematically they see, wow, all those variables start to change. And there's been about 50 solid studies where they keep replicating this effect again. It's a mathematical number. It has to do with relating, human consciousness, the heart consciousness in the brain. It's impacting the field, as we saw with the Global Coherence Initiative. It's further evidence that we can impact the field, but there is a mathematics to it. There is sort of a minimum number, but it's not a big number. And the great thing is the square root of 1%, as the population gets bigger, that number gets relatively smaller. It's not a linear number. You need less and less and less people as the population gets bigger. That's paradoxical, but it's just mathematics of the square root.
That is so beautiful, so amazing, and so well related to this show, to Wellness World Radio, and the idea of getting everyone together to start really, focusing on positive thoughts, on viewing the world the way that we want to see it, and on bringing harmony into the world, like imagining what does a harmonious world look like, feel like. And so I think as we all start to do this heart coherence and brain coherence, visioning what we actually want to see on the planet, we're going to see huge changes.
I agree with you. I'm really excited for the future of humanity and for the potential that we have, and that we're able to bridge science, spirituality, physics, consciousness, mind, matter. And, the science is starting to kind of relate to Eastern mysticism and the wisdom traditions of thousands of years ago. They're starting to talk similar languages. They use different languages, but they're coming up with similar outcomes and findings. And this is good because, some people want to see that there's a science behind this, and they want to go that, is this for real, or is this some wacky kind of thing that somebody came up with? No, it's based on science. And I'm confident that as we bring the science to bear on basically making the world a better place, that we can have more confidence that what we do does make a difference, that when we meditate with a group of people with a pure intention, we can and will change the world.
That was neuroscience researcher Daniel Mauro on the science of co-creation. He can be reached by email at brainhealth@cgocable.ca or visit his website at www.speakingvisionaries.com. His high-performance brain magazine is available at itunes.apple.com, and his book Build Yourself a Better Brain is available at amazon.ca. I hope you really enjoyed today's show on the science of co-creation. If you enjoyed this show, then share it on Facebook and other social media. This is Mindful Suzette, wishing you the world of your dreams. Thank you so much to everyone for listening in today, for adding your energy to co-creating a new world vision for humanity. If you wish to help co-create a better world, or would like to simply support this co-creative endeavor, go to patreon.com/Wellness World Radio. Your contribution is what makes this co-creative show possible. Thank you so much to everyone for your support.